From Up in the Clouds, it's your good friend Rainbow Star, and this is the Bayonetta 2 bodysuit. I begin the process with the base of the costume, the bodysuit. My plan from the start is to use duct tape to place the lines for each seam on the dress form to create an outline. This costume has less divisions than the first games, but still requires several pieces being sewn together. I decided to go with a halter top design based on some of the original artwork, with straps on it to keep it in place if need be. Next, I move on to the test bodysuit. This is made from a basic white fabric and is made from a pre-existing bodysuit pattern of mine. I have to sew this suit completely to be able to use it, which includes a zipper. Sewing it won't take long, thankfully, and there are no sleeves to worry about. I put some extra tape down on the existing tape to make sure the bodysuit doesn't grab it. Then I put the suit on the form. I have already put the suit on myself and marked where certain areas are, like bust point, belly button, knee, etc. From here I can see through the white fabric and use the tape guidelines to now draw on the test suit to see where all the pieces will lie. The back of the legs were a bit tricky, as Bayonetta is drawn to a different scale. Now I rip out the seams and begin cutting the pieces apart. I do this technique with stretch fabrics because I never know how they're going to shape up in the end. Once a piece is cut, I mark what piece it is so I don't lose track. Next comes the pattern pieces for the final form. I often use giant rolls of packing paper found at any store that sells mailing supplies. I take each piece and pin it down to the paper. I try to pin it as flat as possible so no distortion happens. Once that is finished, I use my pattern wheel to trace where the seams will go. The pattern wheel is a funky little tool that has a spiked wheel at the end that pokes holes in pattern paper so you can later trace over it with a pen. It's very useful in draping. Once I finish poking the holes for one piece, I connect the dots into a pattern. Each piece gets marked to signify where it goes. I also marked the top and bottom of each piece, and added extra letters to know which sides attach where. Once every piece is done, I then add a 1/2 inch of seam allowance where needed. Then the pieces get cut. Now I move on to cutting the actual fabric. After smoothing it out and testing the nap, I'll then lay the correct pieces down. This fabric was the inner bluish-gray fabric, so it gets the center front piece and the inner back leg piece. Those get pinned down and then cut. Then comes the outer fabric, the shinier darker gray, and the rest of the suit's pieces will be from this. Pattern paper is removed, and then the pieces are pinned together where seams will be stitched. I made a note not to stitch the whole suit shut just yet, so I left the back open. Then I begin sewing the seams together. For stretch fabrics, a zigzag stitch is ideal, as well as some size of ballpoint needle. For this project I used a 1490. With suits that stretch this much, I prefer to stitch twice for each seam to ensure the stitches don't snap. Here, every seam except for the back, shoulder straps, and inseam are getting stitched. For the diamonds on the back of the legs, each one gets stitched twice at their connection, which required a lot of stopping and starting. Without the final seams in place, the garment can lay flat. This was necessary for the paint going on the front, though I did realize how I could have done it later. I grabbed some cardstock paper long enough for the design and folded it in half. On one side, I drew half of the design on her suit's chest and torso. Once I finished drawing, I kept it folded and cut the design out, creating a stencil. I pinned the stencil down to the suit and began painting. The paint used is a special paint for screen printing, but I put it in a nozzle for direct placement. I chose to smooth this one out a bit with a paint stirrer. Once done, the stencil gets removed. Allowing that to dry, the next stop was the decal on the thighs. This was trickier, but I finally decided to make my own stamp. I printed a graphic from the computer to the correct size, and then cut it and traced it onto a rubber stamp surface. The stamp gets cut from the rubber and then glued onto a stiff foam. When it comes time for painting, I pin spots where the top and bottom of the stamp will go for both legs so that they're aligned correctly. Also note, when painting, pull up any long hair. It can get in the paint and spread it. I had to touch up the stamped spots since the stamps went over a thick seam and didn't distribute well. Before the inseam and back can be stitched, now I have to hem all of the diamond cutouts. This process took a huge amount of time, but it had to be done for the right look in the end. I cut the corners of each hem so the folds would sit better. I did one leg at a time to make sure it would look right. There are 11 diamonds on each leg, so this was quite a process. First leg is done, I move on to the second leg. The next step is to put the zipper in. The back of the neck requires a short separating zipper. Most separating zippers don't come that short, so I had to cut one down to size to fit. With the zipper done, I can now begin the final stitches. Shoulders have to be stitched together, even if they're just a tiny strap. Then we finish up the inseams. This is why we hemmed those diamonds first, because it would be much easier this way. After that, we finish up the straps for the feet. Now here's where I had to make an adjustment, as this was a learning process. The diamond cutouts on the rear were just too big and turned into round circles. I attempted to make a stiff final edging to prevent the shape from getting lost. In the end, it only worked slightly. The holes were still round and large, and I have not found a way to fix them yet. In the future, I might break down and use a flesh-colored mesh to keep them in shape. Finally, I can hem the back, feet, and armholes. Next comes some more painting. Here's where I realized I could have put the garment on the form and removed the form from the pole to lay flat. I finished up some details on the torso, and then it was time to add the blue diamonds. I painted these earlier, you'll see in the accessories video, and after gluing them on, I added the silver details near the ankle. After that, I touched up the thigh designs a bit, and then began the chains. This paint is flexible, so the chains will not constrict the fabric stretch. This was a huge problem with the Bayonetta 1 cosplay. The last bit of detail needed are the buckles on the diamonds. I could not find buckles small enough, so I simply painted them on. In the end, I really liked how the diamond cutouts worked, and the inner fabric color radiated that same blue tint it needed. backless part worked out better than I'd hoped, and overall the suit worked out great. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay whimsical.